The morning wind was colder than usual. Elena pulled her tattered flannel jacket tighter around her shoulders as she stepped onto the front porch of her small, weather-worn cottage on the outskirts of the Nevada desert. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but its amber light brushed the ridgelines like a whisper, outlining the distant mountains in gold. The land was quiet, save for the faint rustle of sagebrush and the far-off cry of a hawk slicing through the stillness. She sipped the last of her weak coffee, now lukewarm, and scanned the horizon like she did every morning. It had become a ritual, one born not of hope, but of habit. There wasn't much to expect out here anymore. The ranch she once dreamed would thrive had long ago wilted under the weight of too many droughts and too few second chances. She didn't have cattle or a husband anymore. Just the land, a few chickens, and a barn filled more with ghosts than grain. As she moved toward the chicken coop, a sudden flicker of movement in the distance caught her eye. She froze. Across the plain, near the dry arroyo, something moved with the grace of wind and the strength of thunder. A horse. Not just any horse, wild, unbranded, lean but strong. A Mustang. Its coat shimmered like brushed bronze in the morning light, its mane tousled and free. Elena squinted. It was watching her. Her heart beat faster. Wild horses were rare this close to human dwellings. The BLM had rounded up most in recent years, carting them off to holding pens or auctions. Seeing one this close was like spotting a spirit walking in daylight. The Mustang didn't run. It just stood there, head high, ears twitching in her direction, then slowly lowered its head to sniff the dry ground. Elena knew better than to approach. Mustangs were proud and wary, but something about this one, its calmness, the way it hadn't bolted, stirred something in her. A memory, maybe, or a hunger for something she'd forgotten she could feel. She stepped back into the house and returned moments later with a half-bag of oats she'd kept in the pantry, for reasons she never could explain. Her boots crunched over the gravel as she walked a few cautious steps into the open. She tore the bag open, poured a small pile onto an old metal dish, and placed it a safe distance from the porch. Then she retreated, sat back in her chair, and waited. The Mustang didn't come closer. Not yet, but it didn't run either. By noon, the sun baked the land in silence. Elena had returned to her chores, collecting eggs, feeding the chickens, repairing a bit of the porch railing. She kept looking out of the corner of her eye, half expecting the Mustang to vanish like a mirage. Instead, it inched closer. By evening, as the sky burned orange and violet, the oats were gone. She didn't see the horse eat, but the tracks left in the dust said enough. The next morning, she repeated the routine. This time she waited longer. The Mustang emerged again from the arroyo, warier than before, but curious. Closer. It circled the dish twice before dipping its head to eat, glancing up at her between mouthfuls. She stayed still, didn't move, didn't breathe too hard. Something passed between them, something without words, built of silence and hunger and mutual solitude. Each day the Mustang came. Each day it stayed longer. Elena began to talk to it. Not in full conversations, just soft fragments. Storm's coming tomorrow. You remind me of someone. If I were you, I wouldn't trust me either. She didn't expect it to understand, but it helped fill the air with something other than ache. She named him Ghost. It felt right. He was always there and not there. Solid but untouchable. A haunting presence on a land full of buried stories. Elena hadn't realized how much she'd missed talking. Not just to the chickens or herself, but to something that listened, even if it never responded. She didn't need much from Ghost. Just his presence was enough. Until the 6th morning. The wind was sharp that day, carving down from the mountains like a blade. Her breath curled in white wisps as she opened the door. The feed dish sat empty again, but Ghost wasn't in sight. She waited. An hour passed. Then 2. No sign of him. A strange ache stirred in her chest. She tried not to name it. It was ridiculous to feel so invested in a horse she couldn't even touch. But Ghost had become a part of her mornings, a part of her healing. His absence rang louder than she expected. By afternoon, she convinced herself it was over. Maybe the BLM had finally come through. Or maybe Ghost had simply moved on, as wild things do. The sun sank. Still no sign. That night, She barely slept. Then came the knock. 3 sharp taps against her front door. Elena jolted upright in bed, heart thudding. No one visited her. Not this late. Not out here. She swung her legs over the edge and grabbed the heavy flashlight from her nightstand. Another knock. Slower this time. She crept toward the door, flipped the lock, and eased it open a crack. Nothing. Just the dark. She stepped out, scanning the porch, then the yard, then the horizon beyond the fence. And there, just 10 feet away, stood Ghost. But he wasn't alone. Beside him, shivering and small, was a foal. Elena blinked. The flashlight trembled slightly in her grip. The foal looked no older than a few days. Thin legs, awkward steps, fur like damp straw. It pressed close to Ghost's flank, eyes wide with confusion and fear. What in heaven? Elena lowered the light, afraid of startling them. She stepped slowly down the porch stairs, not quite believing what she was seeing. Ghost didn't move. He just stared at her, then at the foal. She reached them in silence, feeling the wind shift against her cheeks. The foal let out a soft, nervous snort and stumbled back, but Ghost stepped forward slightly, like a sentinel. It was an offering, a gift. She dropped to one knee, not touching the foal, just observing it. Its coat was matted, ribs too visible. A lost thing, a fragile thing. "Where did you find this baby?" she whispered. Of course, there was no answer. But in Ghost's steady gaze, she found something close to intention, as if he had chosen her, as if he knew she would care. Elena rose slowly, her breath catching in the back of her throat. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of being needed again. "All right," she said softly. "Let's get you both somewhere warm." She led them slowly toward the barn, Ghost walking with a calmness that belied his nature. The foal hesitated, then followed, drawn to the safety of the barn's golden light. Inside, she laid out hay, filled a trough with water, brought an old horse blanket from the back corner. She didn't have formula, but she had oats soaked in warm milk and a few apples she hadn't eaten. The foal nibbled, awkward but eager. Ghost stayed by the door, half in shadow, watching. As the wind picked up outside and the first flurries of snow began to fall, rare for Nevada, but not impossible, Elena leaned against the stall wall and watched them both. She didn't understand it. Not yet. But in that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that they were here. And for the first time in years, so was she. The barn became a refuge. Days passed in quiet rhythm, measured not by hours or clocks, but by breath and hooves and the rising steam of warm oats in cold air. Elena hadn't meant to become a caretaker again. Life had stripped that from her, slowly and without mercy, leaving behind only survival and memory. But now, with a wild stallion outside and a fragile foal curled on straw inside, she moved with new purpose. She named the foal Ash. His coat had a dusty hue that shimmered silver in the light, and his legs, though still unsteady, gained strength each morning. He ate greedily, drank deeply, and nuzzled her hand with something like trust. Elena found herself whispering to him in the early hours, not always out loud, but in glances, gestures, the silent offerings of someone who had forgotten the shape of closeness. Ghost remained outside, never entered the stall, never allowed her near enough to touch. But he watched, always. His eyes, black and fathomless, missed nothing. He would linger at the open door, stepping just close enough to ensure Ash was well before vanishing into the chaparral and shadows. Elena never saw where he went, but he always returned. The central question pressed in on her more each day. Where had Ash come from? The foal was too young to survive without a mare, and yet there was none. No other horses had been seen. No tracks. No broken fence lines. Just Ghost, who had appeared as suddenly as the foal, bearing him like a messenger with a burden he couldn't carry alone. Elena didn't speak of it to anyone. There was no one to tell anyway. Her nearest neighbor lived 10 miles away, and the postman only came on Fridays. The phone line inside her cottage still worked, but she hadn't used it for more than ordering feed. She didn't need opinions. She needed time. One morning, a low moan from the barn stirred her from sleep. She rushed outside, boots untied, hair uncombed, heart hammering. Ash was thrashing, his thin legs scraping through hay, nostrils flaring. Panic rippled off him like heat. "It's okay," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "Sure, baby, sure." His breathing was ragged, shallow, eyes rolling toward her with uncomprehending fear. She checked his limbs, no wounds. His stomach felt hard beneath her palm. Colic. A chill ran through her. She had seen it before. Too many times. It could take a horse in hours. She sprang into motion, throwing open the feed bins, rummaging for oil, salts, anything. She massaged his belly, tried to coax him to his feet. He whimpered. She whispered back, not words, just sounds, low, soft, constant. An hour passed. Then two. He didn't get better. She stepped out to breathe, to think, to scream if necessary. The sun had risen high, but the air remained bitingly cold. Ghost stood 10 feet away, still as a statue. "Help me," she said, voice raw. "If you can. Please." As if understanding, Ghost moved forward. He pushed past the barn door, his first time entering, and approached the stall. Elena stepped back. Ash lifted his head at the sound of Ghost's hooves. The foal's eyes locked on the stallion, and then, slowly, he struggled to his knees, then to his feet, leaning against the wooden wall for balance. Ghost didn't touch him, but he stood close, silent, anchoring. Elena watched, breath caught in her throat, as Ash took 3 trembling steps and collapsed against Ghost's leg. The stallion didn't flinch, just stood there, still and strong, a living pillar. By nightfall, Ash's breathing had steadied. The worst had passed. Elena sat in the straw, knees drawn to her chest, exhaustion draped over her like a cloak. Ghost remained beside the foal for hours. When he finally moved, he didn't go far, just lay in the doorway, head resting on crossed forelegs. That was the night she allowed herself to believe this wasn't chance. Something had brought them here. Or someone. The next few days brought more calm. Ash regained his appetite, though Elena now watched him with double vigilance. Ghost's behavior changed too. He lingered more often, even letting Elena approach within arm's length before sidestepping away. He didn't trust her. Not fully. But the barrier was thinning. One evening, as the sky melted into lavender and dusk, she sat outside the barn, sipping coffee gone cold. Ghost stood nearby, eyes on the horizon. She spoke without looking at him. "I had a son once," she said softly. "His name was Gabriel. The wind didn't answer. He was wild like you. Rode before he could read. Laughed in the face of storms. Said he'd never be tamed." She smiled faintly. He was right. She traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "He joined the army. I didn't want him to. But he said he had to prove something. Maybe to himself. Maybe to me." She paused, voice catching. "Came home broken. Quiet. Wouldn't talk about what happened. Just started riding again. Said the horses were the only ones who didn't ask questions." Ghost shifted his weight. One day he rode out and didn't come back. Found his horse at the edge of the canyon, still saddled. She looked up at Ghost. "Sometimes I think he became the wind." The stallion didn't move, but his eyes met hers. The silence between them was full of meaning. She stood and walked slowly toward him. He didn't back away. Her hand rose, slow, deliberate, and hovered near his muzzle. Ghost let her touch him, just for a second. Her palm brushed against his skin, warm and rough, electric with life. He exhaled, long and deep, and then turned, walking into the twilight. Elena stood frozen, heart full of something vast and unknown. That night, she dreamed of hooves pounding the desert floor, of dust clouds and burning skies, of her son riding not away, but toward her, his face clearer than it had been in years. She woke in tears. The next morning, the world shifted. A black SUV rumbled down the dirt road, a rare sight. Elena stepped out cautiously, hand brushing the old rifle near the door, just in case. The vehicle stopped. A man stepped out. Tall, clean-cut, early 50s. Government issue written in every crease of his pressed jacket. "Miss Holloway?" he asked. She nodded. "Depends who's asking." He smiled politely. "Jackson Hart, Bureau of Land Management." Her stomach turned. "We've had reports of a Mustang sighted in this area," he said. "Possibly one that evaded a recent roundup." She crossed her arms. Don't know anything about that. He glanced past her toward the barn. May I look around? Do you have a warrant? His smile tightened. Not yet. Then no. Jackson hesitated, then pulled a business card from his coat and handed it to her. If you see anything unusual, please let us know. That horse is technically government property. He returned to his SUV and drove off without further protest, tires spitting dust. Elena didn't move for a long time. Ghost had appeared for a reason. So had Ash. And now the world wanted to take them back. She walked to the barn. Ghost wasn't there. Ash dozed in the hay, growing stronger by the day. She knelt beside him, ran her fingers down his neck. You're not going anywhere, she whispered. Not if I can help it. The words sounded fiercer than she'd expected. She wasn't just sheltering a horse anymore. She was preparing to fight. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of losing. Not yet. Not again. Elena rose before dawn, wrapped in flannel and resolve. The sky was a vast bruise above her, streaked with fading stars. In the barn, Ash greeted her with a nicker, low, expectant. His legs were surer now, muscles thickening day by day. He pressed his muzzle to her arm as she dropped fresh hay into the manger. Ghost stood at the doorway, his silhouette framed by pale light, watchful and unreadable. They were a unit now, Elena, the orphan foal, and the phantom stallion. But that unity felt fragile. Jackson Hart's visit hadn't just unsettled her. It had cracked the thin shell of safety she'd been clinging to. Elena knew how these things worked. If the government wanted Ghost back, they wouldn't ask twice. They'd come with trucks and ropes and armed officers quoting regulation. And when they did, it wouldn't just be Ghost they'd take. Ash was a Mustang, too, wild by law, even if his hooves now knew the feel of straw and shelter. She thought of Gabriel, how he'd once told her, freedom doesn't come from running. It comes from knowing where you belong. Back then, she hadn't understood, but now she did. Ghost belonged here, not because she had claimed him, but because he had chosen this place, chosen Ash. And maybe, just maybe, he had chosen her too. Later that morning, she drove into town. Her truck, more rust than paint, coughed its way over the gravel road until the paved streets of Dawson appeared like a faded memory. She passed shuttered shops, a gas station with one working pump, and the corner cafe where old men sat nursing coffee and worn opinions. She didn't stop, not until she reached the feed store. "Morning, Elena," said Rick, the owner, peering over the counter with his usual mix of suspicion and curiosity. "You're early. Need more hay pellets," she said, "and linseed, and full formula." He raised an eyebrow. "Taking care of a baby, huh?" She didn't answer. "BLM was here yesterday," he said casually, asking about a stallion. "Said it was government property." She met his eyes. "You tell them anything?" "Nope. Didn't see a thing." He paused. "But they'll be back. Probably with paperwork." "I know." He leaned forward. "You need help." She hesitated. "Maybe." Rick was a man of few words, but he gave a short nod and started ringing her up. "You're not the only one tired of watching good animals disappear behind chain-link fences." When she returned home, she found Ghost pacing. His muscles rippled beneath his coat, tail swishing, ears flicking back and forth. Ash stood nervously behind the stall door, sensing the tension. She set the feed down and slowly approached Ghost. "They're coming," she said. He stopped, nostrils flared. "We have to be ready." Ghost lowered his head, not in submission, but acknowledgement. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she pored over old maps and fencing diagrams. Years ago, she and Gabriel had fenced in part of the northern ridge, reinforced it with cedar posts and thick wire. There was a narrow pass beyond it, a crease in the hills only locals knew about. If she could guide Ghost and Ash through it, they might vanish into the high desert, at least until the heat cooled. But it was risky. Ash wasn't strong enough for long travel. And Ghost, he was too proud to be led, too smart to be tricked, unless he trusted her. The next morning, she opened the barn door wide and scattered hay into the open field beyond. Ash stepped out slowly, blinking in the sun. Ghost stood beside him, then turned to Elena. She walked forward, hands at her sides. "Let me show you something." She didn't reach for a halter, didn't try to lead, just turned and walked up the ridge, the same trail she and Gabriel had taken so many times before. She didn't look back. After a few minutes, she heard hooves behind her. When she reached the ridge, both horses stood beside her. Wind tugged at Ghost's mane. Ash blinked up at her, trusting. She pointed to the narrow pass between the rocks. "Beyond that is safety," she said. "I can't come with you, but you'll be free." Ghost stared at the gap, then at her. She couldn't tell if he understood. That afternoon, the second visit came. A government truck this time. 2 agents stepped out. One was Jackson Hart, the other a younger woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard. "We're here for the stallion," Jackson said. "He's not here," Elena replied evenly. Jackson looked past her, toward the barn. "Mind if we look?" "I do." The younger agent frowned. "You're obstructing a federal inquiry." "I'm protecting a life. There are protocols." "And I remember a time," Elena interrupted, "when a man could protect what came to his door without needing to explain it to the government." Jackson sighed. "Ms. Holloway, the horse is not yours. He was scheduled for relocation to a federal facility. To be broken, trained, sold off to someone who sees him as a trophy. He's wild. He's dangerous. No, he's been protecting something precious. He's been more of a parent than most people I know." A pause. "What about the foal?" the younger agent asked. "He's under my care. He may be wild stock, too." Elena stepped forward. "You want them? Bring a court order. Bring a warrant. But know this, if you touch one hair on that foal's head, you'll have to go through me." Jackson studied her, then gave a tight nod. "We'll be back," he said. They drove off. She stood there, breath shaking, fists clenched. Inside the barn, Ghost watched her from the shadows. That night, thunder rolled in the distance. Not rain, just noise. Like a warning. She opened the stall, let Ash nuzzle her hands, then tied a small satchel of grain and medicine to a halter she laid gently over his neck. He was calm. Too calm. Then she turned to Ghost. "Go," she whispered. "Go while you still can." He didn't move. She stepped closer. "You've done enough. You gave him a chance. You saved him. Now save yourself." He stared at her for a long moment, then turned and trotted toward the ridge. Ash followed. At the top, Ghost paused. "Look back." Elena lifted her hand in farewell. Then they vanished through the gap. The next morning, the agents returned, but the barn was empty. Jackson stared at the stall, the worn straw, the cracked bucket. "You moved them." "I let them go." The young agent scowled. "We can still track." "No," Jackson said, surprising her. He looked out at the hills. "They're gone." Elena watched him. "You don't agree with this, do you?" she asked. "I believe in rules," he said slowly. "But not all rules are just." Then he left. Weeks passed. No one came. The land grew quiet again. Elena spent her days tending to the old fence, repainting the porch, fixing the roof Gabriel never finished. She still rose early, still kept a bucket of oats by the barn door, just in case. Then, one morning, just as the sun split the sky, she heard hoofbeats. She stepped outside. There, standing in the morning mist, was Ash, taller now, stronger, and behind him, not Ghost, but a young filly. Ash had returned, not alone. He walked up to her, nuzzled her hand, and in that moment, Elena understood something final and full. She hadn't just saved them. They had saved her, too. The seasons shifted, quiet and sure, as if the land itself exhaled after holding its breath too long. The hills turned gold, then gray, then white with frost, and Elena remained, anchoring her little corner of the world like a stone in a stream. She had lost much, but not everything. Ash was thriving. The foal who once trembled at every sound now galloped through the fields with grace and strength, a streak of midnight against the pale grass. The filly who had returned with him, a curious, flame-colored thing with intelligent eyes, trailed close behind, matching him step for step. Elena named her Ember, not just for her color, but because she felt like something lit from the inside, a warm promise glowing quietly through the cold. Together, The young pair explored the pastures like children testing the edges of their world. They chased wind and birds, nipped playfully at each other's manes, and returned to the barn each night with burrs in their tails and stories in their eyes. Elena never asked where Ghost had gone. She didn't have to. He was in every rustle of the wind through the oaks, every ridge trail Ash followed by instinct. Every time the young stallion stopped suddenly, ears perked, as if listening to something distant and familiar. Ghost was no longer just a horse. He was myth now, memory made real in the way Ash led, the way Ember trusted. But Peace, Elena knew, was a visitor, not a resident. In late spring, a letter came. It arrived without ceremony, folded into a plain envelope and slid beneath her front door. No stamp, no return address, just a folded sheet of government letterhead with a typed message and a signature at the bottom. The BLM was reviewing her case. The foals, Ash and Ember, were under investigation for potential illegal possession of protected wild stock. She had 30 days to comply with inspection procedures. Failure to do so could result in seizure, fines, and legal consequences. She read it once. Then again. The words blurred, but their meaning cut sharp. She knew this had been coming. Ghost's escape had bought her time, not immunity. And now they were circling again, bureaucrats with clipboards and boxes to check, blind to what these animals were beyond their inventory lists. But she wasn't the same woman who trembled when Jackson Hart first appeared at her barn. She was rooted now, like the Mustang she'd come to love. Wild things didn't yield just because a paper told them to. That night, she sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee and the stars above like scattered coals. Ash and Ember grazed near the fence, their silhouettes calm, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the horizon. She knew she couldn't outrun the law, but maybe, just maybe, she could meet it head-on. The next morning, she called Rick. "I need a trailer," she said. "You running or standing?" "Standing. But I'm going to need witnesses." He paused. "You've got friends, Elena. More than you think." In the following days, word spread. Quietly, then not so quietly. Farmers came by with their wives. Old ranchers offered support. Even kids from the reservation rode up on dusty bikes, offering to muck stalls or patch fences. Elena hadn't realized how many people had been watching her fight, how many had silently rooted for her. Ghost had left a mark, not just on the land, but on them too. His story had become a symbol, passed from mouth to mouth like a campfire tale. The BLM returned on a Wednesday. They came in a caravan of white trucks with tinted windows and tired faces. Jackson Hart wasn't among them this time. Instead, a different man stepped out, taller, cleaner, colder. His name was Agent Crowley. He didn't shake her hand. "We're here to inspect the horses," he said. Elena nodded. "You can see them." Ash and Ember stood in the paddock, heads high, unafraid. Ash moved between the filly and the agents as they approached, body tense, but not aggressive. Ember, younger, watched with wide, unblinking eyes. "They're not branded," Crowley said. "They never were," Elena replied. "Which means we can't verify their origin." "Which means—" "They're mine," she said, cutting him off. "They came to me. Orphaned. One barely born. The other raised by a wild stallion who risked everything to protect them." Crowley scribbled something. "You'll need DNA testing," he said. "Fine. Take your samples." He pulled on gloves, then motioned to his assistant. Swabs were taken, hair plucked, hooves photographed. Elena stood firm the entire time, hands at her sides, heart pounding but face unreadable. "I assume," she said finally, "you'll be needing a statement." Crowley looked at her, slightly amused. "We already have what we need." "No," she said. "You don't." She stepped onto the barn porch, where a group of townspeople had gathered. Rick, the Miller sisters from the eastern hills, old Harold with his crooked back and sharper tongue, even the high school principal, who'd once bought hay from her late husband. "They're here to speak," Elena said, "to what's happened, to what that stallion did, and to what this place has become because of him." Crowley looked annoyed. "This isn't a town hall." "No," she said, "but it is a community, and you're not the only one keeping records." And one by one, They spoke. Rick talked about the day Elena rescued Ash, how she poured her own savings into formula and feed, how she'd refused to let the foal die. The Miller sisters spoke of the night they saw Ghost fend off a pack of coyotes, circling the barn like a sentinel. Harold talked about Gabriel, about how this land had always belonged to the wild, and how Elena was honoring that legacy, not defying it. And finally, a boy named Caleb, barely 12, stepped forward. "I used to be scared of horses," he said, "but Miss Elena let me brush the filly once. She just stood there quiet, like she trusted me. I think animals know things we don't." There was a hush after he finished. Crowley closed his notebook. "We'll be in touch," he said. And they left. The following week passed like a held breath. Elena didn't sleep much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw trucks, hear the echo of boots, felt the loss before it came. Then a letter arrived. This time, it bore an official seal and a name she hadn't expected. Jackson Hart. Inside a single sheet. Asterisk, case closed. Horses not subject to federal claim. No further action required. Consider this a courtesy, earned, not given. J.H. Asterisk. Elena folded the paper slowly. Then she walked outside, into the sun. Ash was by the fence, nibbling on a low branch. Ember lifted her head, ears twitching, and trotted toward her. Elena opened the gate. They came to her, without hesitation. She ran her hands along their necks, warm and alive and undeniably hers, not by law, but by love. That night, she sat beside the fire pit Gabriel built with his bare hands. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The horses were near, the land was whole, and the wind whispered through the trees like a lullaby for the untamed. She didn't know what came next, but for now this was enough. She had chosen to stand, and the wild had stood with her.